Hello everyone, I'm Hugh from Loxon and welcome to this video where we look at the solution to our earlier config challenge. So just to refresh your minds, earlier today, or rather our earlier video, we looked at a config challenge which was a office building where there were 3 different offices with 3 different businesses in them, and what the landlord of the building wanted is that the last office to leave, as they set their alarm, it also sets a communal alarm as well. So just to give you the proper background and just to show you as well, if you can never remember what any of these were and you would like to look back over them, you can do so at any time on our website. You can go to loxon.com/enen/id/daily-config-challenge. And on this website, you will see the links here to join the live webinars if you'd like to join us live. Otherwise, you will always be able to see both today's challenge and all of our previous challenges. And on our previous challenges, you will see the morning briefing giving you the challenge, as well as the PDF below it. And you will also see the solution video and the solution config file. So this is today's challenge. And if I open this PDF here, you'll see what the challenge was. So we have a business owner and landlord. They own a large business premises, which is well being used for their own business. They also sublet 2 of the spaces to other businesses. Currently, they all set their respective alarms, but currently the last person to leave needs to go and check the other 2 buildings have been left as well, and then set the communal alarm. This leads to it frequently being forgotten or just plain ignored to do. So what they want is they want it that when the last person out sets their alarm for their office, it also sets the communal alarm, and that the first person in the morning, when they open the door with their NFC through the NFC code touch, that it will also unset the communal alarm as well as their respective office. And then finally, for anyone that got that far, we had a little extra challenge. And that was that the landlord also needs a master key, that when they present their NFC code touch, it will unset all of the alarms in the building so that they can go and do any kind of maintenance that they will need to. Excellent. So now that we've got the problem detailed, we now need to solve it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch my camera over to the demo case that I have here. Firstly, so that you don't have to see my face looking at a laptop screen all video, and secondly, so that I can show you things working as well. And then once I've done that, the second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open up config. Here we go. So I have a blank config file ready for me to get started with, and next to me I have the challenge. So 3 different office units in the building. In each office unit, Loxon is controlling security, lighting, and heating. So probably the first thing we should do for this challenge is we should get that little bit out of the way first. So as you'll be able to see on my config screen, I have already pre-created the pages just to get us started. So I've got office 1, 2, and 3. This one, I need to add myself lighting, and I need to add myself heating, which is the intelligent room controller. And because I know that each office has its own alarm, I'm also going to need to add a burglar alarm to that office as well. For the time being, I'm going to leave all of the options unticked on the burglar alarm. And then what I'm going to do is I am just going to take this, copy and paste it, and do the same in office 2, but just remembering in here to change the room to office 2. And I'm going to do the same for office 3 as well. And again, remember to change that to office 3. So those are the 3 things that each office has: security, lighting, and heating. The communal area is purely motion-based lighting with a door contact on the front door. So in the communal area, I should probably get started by creating some lighting in that area. I will get onto the burglar alarm and anything else we need in the communal area in a little bit. So if we've got lighting in office 1, office 2, office 3, and we've got heating and we've got a burglar alarm, probably the next thing I need to do is start giving myself some inputs for those blocks. Now, I purposefully said in the challenge that we are doing the normal leaving functions. So I said, in there. Currently, we all set our respective alarms when we leave our own offices, which also does all of the other leaving functions for our units. I was kind of alluding to with this that probably the simplest way for a member of staff to leave the office and know that they're the last one out is to do a triple click, just like you would in a house to do a leaving house. So what I'm going to do is I have a touch switch ready to go for Office 1. So I'm going to stick the temperature sensor on the heating, and I'm going to stick the switch on the lighting. And I've also got a motion sensor for the communal office as well. For Office 1 as well. So again, brightness and motion. And let's stick motion on the intelligent room controller as well, just in case anyone is staying at work late, so they want the heating to stay on for them. So the first thing that I need to do within Office 1 is that when they leave with a triple click, it needs to turn off the lights, cancel any overruns on the heating, and set their office burglar alarm. And so what I'm going to do on the lighting controller, I'm going to use the RAQ output, which outputs a pulse on a triple click from any switch input, and I'm going to create myself a memory flag. That memory flag is going to go to RAQ, and I'm going to call this memory flag leaving Office 1. So now, when this switch gets triple pressed, this memory flag will fire. And so the next thing I need to do with this memory flag is I need to get it to cancel the overrides on the heating through the R input. It will automatically turn off the lights because the triple click, the lighting controller will see the same as a double click. And then the next thing we need to do with this triple click is also set Office 1's alarm. So we need to take that same leaving office pulse, and we need to arm the alarm with it, which we can use input V, which arms the alarm with delay. Brilliant. The other thing we're going to need is to actually assign the correct things to this burglar alarm block as well. So because this is just for Office 1, we probably only want to link it to the inputs and outputs that are applicable to Office 1. So Office 1's lighting and switch click as an output, and Office 1's motion sensor as an input. Office 2 and Office 3 shouldn't have an effect on this office. Okay, so that's Office 1 sorted for their leaving office. We then need to do exactly the same with Office 2 and Office 3. So I'm just going to do that ever so quickly. So brightness and motion, motion on the heating, and then touch switch for temperature, and for the switch output there, and then RAQ for the triple click, memory flag, into RAQ, and then that is going to be leaving Office 2. And then leaving Office 2 is also going to cancel the overrides on heating and also set the burglar alarm with a delay. And then finally, Office 3. So Office 3 motion sensor, brightness and motion on the lighting, motion on the heating, and then Office 3's touch switch, temperature, and the T5 control. And then again, the triple click to leave the office with a memory flag. So this will be leaving Office 3. Okay, so that is all 3 of my offices left. So now that we've got that little bit, we need to sort out the next part of the detail, which is that the last person to leave, as well as shutting off their office, will also arm the communal alarm. Now, there are a few ways that we can do this. So we know that in the communal area, that means that we are going to need a burglar alarm block. So the communal area will also need a burglar alarm. The communal area probably, again, also wants to only have its own things in it. So its own motion sensor and its own lighting controller. And as I said, there is also a front door contact as well. So that will need to go in here as well into I4, alarm input for external door contacts. And we also need to remember to invert that because it is normally closed. So what I need to do is I need to say that only when all three of these burglar alarms have been armed does the communal alarm arm as well. So let me just remember to tie in my other sensors in the other alarms. Office 3, Office 3, Office 3. So the first thing that I probably want to do with the burglar alarm blocks is I probably want to change some of the parameters on them. So to do that, I'm going to right click and edit parameters of all burglar alarms. The reason for this is the default arming delay is 10 minutes, and that is far too long. Now, we will be setting this for 30 seconds eventually, but for testing purposes, I'm going to set it to 10 seconds, and then I'm going to change it back at the end of the video. So what we need is only when all three offices have been set does the communal alarm set, but again, after an arming delay. So it should be all three arm, then it triggers the communal alarm to arm with an arming delay. Now, there are several ways that we can do this. Firstly, we're going to need an output from each burglar alarm that tells us whether it's currently armed or not. Best way to take that is from AQ. AQ will give you a value of 0 when it's disarmed, 1 when it's armed with motion, and 2 when it's armed without motion. Now, because there is only motion sensors in these offices, I can safely assume that you'd never be arming it without motion sensors. So we're looking for a value of 1 from all of these. So the first way that I can do this is through AND blocks. So through AND blocks, I can say that Office 1 and Office 2 have to be armed to trigger this output. And then I'll need a second AND block that says AND Office 3, and then I need something to compare it against, so it would be a constant. So I'd have to have a constant for on. And then when both of those are true, could it finally arm the communal alarm? So this would be option number 1. So I'll only do it for the first one. So it'd end up like this. So I'd have Office 1 and Office 2, AQ, Office 3, AQ, and a constant of on, and then both of these AND blocks into another AND block, which then goes onto V of the communal alarm, which arms with delay. That would work, and that would work perfectly, but it's obviously a touch messy. So there is a way that I can make this much simpler with one single function block. And that function block is one of my favorite function blocks. It means that I don't need that constant either. And that is a status block. So with a status block, I can define some nice, clever logic. So I'm going to need 3 inputs on the status block. I'm going to need to take the AQs from all of the offices into each of their respective AI inputs. So AI1, AI2, and then this one into AI3. And then if I double click on the status block, I can create my logic for it. So I can say that AI1, so the Office 1 equals 1, and AI2 equals 1, because all of these are ANDed, and AI3 equals 1. And that would then give me a state value, so a value on the end of it of 1. So it would only be when Office 1, 2, and 3 have armed that it would output a value of 1. At all other times, it would output a value of 0, which means that nothing is happening. I could as well, if we were going to give the ability to arm without motion sensors, I could actually say that instead of being equal to 1, it could be equal or greater than 1. And that would then give the ability for the offices to set without motion as well. But for the time being, I'm just going to do equal 1, state value of 1, and this doesn't need to be seen in the app because it's just being used for some logic. And then because I'm fussy and I want to make sure that I only send a pulse to the burglar alarm block rather than holding an input down on it, I want to recognize just when it's the rising edge of this output here. And if you watch my other videos, you'll know that I love an edge detection. So I can then take that status block into edge detection, and only on the rising edge pulse does it arm my burglar alarm. Excellent. Save that in. And then that is the first part of the scenario sorted. That is only when all three offices have armed does the communal alarm arm. So as the last person walks out with their triple click, when their alarm arms, it will then trigger the countdown for the communal alarm to arm. And I can also go into live view with manual value adjustment, and we can see what's happening in here as well. So I could actually simulate this happening, and it will also happen in real life for us here as well. So the great thing about live view with manual value adjustment is I can fake it so that it's actually happening. So I can go on the touch switch here and do a triple click, and you'll be able to see on this now that this one is arming. I can then do the same on Office 2. And again on here, we can see that that's arming. And then finally, I can do a triple click on Office 3. And then when I go back to the communal area, you can see that it'll only be when Office 3 finally finishes arming. There we go. It sends the rising edge pulse, which sent a pulse into V. And as you can see here, that's now counting down for it arming. And after that 10-second arming delay happens, AQ will go to 1. So that's brilliant. That is now sorted. That the last person's triple click will set the communal alarm to arm. The next bit I need is that the first person who arrives in the morning unsets the communal alarm and also unsets their respective office alarm. Now to do this, obviously the first thing I'm going to need is an NFC code touch. So I'm going to need to give myself an NFC code touch block, and I'm going to need to put that in the communal area. That NFC code touch is also going to need to be able to open a door. So I can take my front door lock, put that onto Q1, and make sure it's got a name there, and that will unlock the door. Now again, like many things in Loxon, there are many ways to skin a cat. So what we need is we need to be able to differentiate between the different users coming in to be able to trigger different things. And now the first thing is we can safely say that anyone arriving into this building should unset the communal alarm. So we probably just want to take the QA output, which is a digital output that provides a pulse when permission is granted, and that just straight away goes into the communal alarm into R, so that when anyone arrives in who is granted access, they'll unset the communal alarm. The only next bit is how we get it so that it unsets the respective office alarms as well. Now, to my mind, straight away, I can think of two ways of doing this. One way is simple for us as an installer to set up, but makes it slightly more complex for whoever's managing this building to then manage keys and fobs. The second way is more complex for me to set up, but probably makes it much more slick for whoever's managing the building. So if we start with the complex way, but this does make it easier for whoever's going to be assigning fobs and tags. Now the complex way is what I can do is I can create separate users for all of the various people who will be using this building. So in each of the offices, you know, they may have 10, 15 employees. So you could end up with 30 or 40 different users here, and that's absolutely fine. And with each user, you can give them their own respective user group, so they can only see their own respective office. They can't see other offices. wonderful. Give them each their own fobs so that they don't have to share codes and fobs, and we get a nice audit trail for it as well. And then the really important thing is being able to recognize which office one of these people has been in. And the way that we can do that is there is a field as of version 10.3 of config called user ID. And what we can do is we can give a kind of communal start to a user ID for particular offices. So for instance, anyone who works in Office 1, we could start their user ID with off1, and then after off1, do maybe dash and then their respective ID for that office. For user 2, for Office 2, we could do off2 dash and again their respective ID. So if we had a second person in Office 1, their user ID would be off1-02. And then what we can do from that is on the NFC code touch tree, we have an output that is TQU. And what this does is this provides identification of the last authorization, including user ID, username, NFC tag, or access code name. And so what we would need to do is we'd need to take that text string, we would need to search that text string for a specific search term that we recognize and convert that into something else. And again, new as of version 10.3 is a function block called command recognition that extracts values from text. So we could put TQU into command recognition, and I'm going to do that as a reference just to make it a bit neater. So TQU into command recognition. And then in command recognition, what you do is you double click on it and you put in your strings of text that it's searching for. So I would put in off1, off2, off3, and then let's say I'd called the owner's user ID owner, and I would OK that. And it will automatically format it. So it will include your line breaks. And then what I'd need to do is once I'd saved that in, I'd then need to present one fob from every one of the respective user groups to the NFC code touch to see what analog value it gave me for each. Because what it'll do is it will convert that string of text off one into an analog value. And then what I'd do is I'd use that analog value, and when the analog value equals the value of that specific office, so let's say anyone who had off1 in their user ID, it outputted a number of 50. I could use something like an equal block and say that if the command recognition equals 50, it means that it's Office 1 that's entered, or somebody from Office 1, and so I would take that to my burglar alarm to reset this. So that's the first way of doing it. And as I said, slightly more complex for us to be able to commission as an engineer, because it requires us to have one fob programs from every different office and to test it to see what analog value we get. But the advantage of this for the user, for the owner of the system, is then when they're creating new users, it makes it very simple for them as long as they know the user ID structure to follow. Because again, a new addition to version 10.3 of config is the ability to do user management within the app. So what I can do from here is I can edit users, I can create new users. So I could create a new user and I would call him Hugh. And I can then add a user ID from here. So I can say that Hugh works in Office 1 and he is user number 2 in Office 1. And then I can also put him in the Office 1 user group. And I can also add access codes. And if I had an NFC code touch, I would also be able to assign him a key fob from within the app as well. And this is why it's much, much more straightforward from the user's perspective, because it means then that the building owner doesn't have to touch config. The second way of doing it, which is slightly more straightforward from our perspective, is to not use the TQU output, and instead to take advantage of the fact that the NFC code touch block actually has up to 6 available outputs. And so what we would actually be doing then in this case is instead of our front door lock being assigned to Q1, we would instead have our outputs dedicated to the different offices. So we would have office 1, we would have office 2, office 3, and then we would have the owner of the building. And then what we would say is we would need to show all of those outputs there. And we would need to say that any of these outputs unlock the front door, because any of these people will be able to open the front door. And then anyone who is on output 1 can unlock can unset office 1's alarm. So that would go to the R on office 1. Output 2 would unset office 2's alarm, so on and so forth, and you get the gist. And then output 4, you would go to R on every alarm. And then what we would need to do from here is, instead of assigning codes and fobs to users within the periphery list, we would instead create them within the block itself. So we would add a user here within the block itself. They would be, for instance, office 1. They would have a code of 1, 2, 3, 4, and they would only be able to use output 1. Whereas the user for office 2 would only be able to use output 2. And in that way, when they put their code or their fob in, they're only triggering the output that they're allowed to use. All of those outputs can unlock the front door, but each output is individually linked to the reset of each burglar alarm block. The only downside to doing it this way is the customer through the app will be able to do the codes through the app, because they are done right here within the NFC block itself. So they can add access codes to their heart's content and say what the permission is, but they won't be able to assign fobs within the block itself, tags. That has to be done in config. So that's the second way of doing it. So those are our 2 ways of achieving what we want to achieve, and that is also our extra challenge sorted as well, because we've already done it here with Q4 being for the owner, and if we'd done it the first way, then we would just have whatever analog value it gave us for the owner's user ID to go to all of the respective burglar alarm blocks. Excellent. So that is today's problem completely solved. The only other thing I would add, just to make it really, really nice, is some kind of visual representation to say that the communal alarm has now armed. So we've obviously got the communal lighting controller here, which, as I said in the brief, was motion triggered only. So that means that when you leave the building and you've walked out the door, shut the door behind you, the lights are going to stay on in the communal area. So it could be quite cool if we could get it to actually turn the lights off in the communal area once the alarm has set. And secondary to that, we also have in the lighting controller a great feature called presence simulation. And presence simulation makes it look like somebody's there when they're not. So we could turn on presence simulation in all of the offices. And then what we could do is, back on that communal page, we could create ourselves a switch block. And from that switch block, we could then reuse that edge detection that we created earlier. And we could say that when the alarm arms, it turns this switch block on. And then when that falling edge happens, it turns the switch block back off. I'm going to move this down a touch because it's a little bit messy up there. So when the alarm arms, it'll turn this switch block on. When the alarm disarms, it'll turn this switch block back off. We could then get it to operating mode present simulation. We could get it to turn on the operating mode of present simulation when this switch is on. And then we could also have the rising edge of this switch trigger reset on our communal lighting controller. So then when that burglar alarm finishes arming, it will also turn off the communal lights. And that is about the only extra thing I would add there. Brilliant. I really hope you've enjoyed. I'm just going to save that in again. Not that there's much to show you anyway, because I don't have an NFC code touch. But as you saw from live view earlier, that was all working for the triple clicks on each office to set. And then you can already see the logic happening here. QA, anyone granted access will reset the communal alarm, and then only specific offices will unset their own alarms. Wonderful. Hope you've enjoyed. Thank you for watching, and I will see you again next time.